an hour and a half. This panel today is entitled Reclaiming Native Ground, the Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe and the Long Fight to Maintain Food Sovereignty while Combating Coastal Erosion. And I'm going to add climate change to that title. Going to introduce everybody briefly. Second Chairman Donald Dardar was not able to be with us today for reasons relating to Hurricane Ida that we will be discussing during this session. We have here, sitting next to me, I'm Dr. Laura Kelley. I'll be moderating this panel, and next to me is Theresa Dardar. Theresa Dardar is a member of the Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe. She is a strong local leader advocating for the restoration and protection of not only the ecosystem of the Gulf of Mexico and its coastal areas, but also for the people and communities who call Louisiana home. As a member of the Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe, she's a powerful voice for her community. She served as representative and spokesman for her tribe at local, state, national, and international forums, such as the UN's Human Rights of Indigenous Peoples Conference. And she has participated in the Intertribal Agricultural Council and has represented the Gulf Coast in a variety of capacities. She's been involved with the Go Fish, which is the Gulf Organized Fisheries in Solidarity and Hope, First Peoples Conservation Council, and others. Sitting next to Theresa is Patty Ferguson-Bohnee. Patty Ferguson-Bohnee is the director of the Indian Legal Clinic, faculty director of the Indian Legal Program, and the clinical professor of law at the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law at Arizona State University. She is the co-founder of the Native American Bar Association of Arizona and is the past president of the National Native American Bar Association. Professor Ferguson-Bohnee has substantial experience in Indian law, election law, voting rights, and status clarification for tribes. She's been highly involved in the federal recognition process and religious freedoms for non-recognized tribal members. She's also an advocate for the rights of unrecognized tribes in response to environmental disasters. Patty Ferguson-Bohnee is a member of the Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe. And sitting next to Patty is Christine Verdin. Christine Verdin was born and raised in Pointe-au-Chien. She's a graduate of South Terrebonne and received her Bachelor's of Art in Education and her Master's in Early Childhood and Administration at Nicholls State University. She has served as the tribe's delegate to the National Congress of American Indians. In 2010, she advocated for a resolution to support coordination with state-recognized tribes in response to the Deepwater Horizon oil spill at the National Congress of American Indians, also known as the BP oil spill. Her first language is Indian French, and she hopes to open an immersion school for children to maintain their language. She is a council member for the Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe and is obviously a member of that tribe as well. Thank you, everybody. And I'd like our audience to just know that we are currently filming at Tulane University, in part because of Hurricane Ida, the lack of internet, the very spotty cell reception. And so the tribal members got up very early this morning to drive up from the bayou to be here at Tulane today in order to be at this presentation, which I'm sure we all were hoping was going to be in person, but we're glad to be here nevertheless. We're working off of one computer, so chat might be kind of difficult to try to respond to, but we'll get to that and we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. I'd like to kind of start off to have the audience know a little bit more about your tribe. So if each one of you want to say something about that, that would be great. Christine, you want to start with you?
So our tribe is one of the southernmost parts of Chairperson Parish. In south of Houma, part of our tribe is on Chairperson, the other part is on Lafourche. Our people make a living down on the waters there, shrimping, crabbing, oystering. I'm missing something. Fishing. We call it God's country there because we can sustain ourselves with the food we have there, along with raising cattle, and which has not happened in a long time because of coastal erosion and losing our land to water instead of just pasturing. I was born and raised there. Started at school at the Indian school in our area, and later on went on to the white school in Upper Pointe-au-Chien. I now live in Berg, which is not far, but visit down Pointe-au-Chien almost every day.
So I'll just build on what Christine said. Pointe-au-Chien, we are one of the oldest inhabited areas in the state of Louisiana, continuously occupied areas. We've lived in Pointe-au-Chien since time immemorial, and the area is very important to us because it's a part of who we are. So the land is part of who we are. Our ancestors are buried there. We have sacred sites, mounds, villages where people have had to leave because there's no longer fresh water as a result of changes to the landscape caused by the rerouting of the Mississippi River and also oil and gas exploration. So that's caused a lot of damage to the land area. And so where our current village is just a limited area as compared to our territory that we once lived in and occupied. Well, we continue to work there and we continue to respect the land of our ancestors. We cannot use it in the same way.
And the only thing I have to add is that we still do gardens and have enough vegetables to supply the community during the spring.
Yeah, and I'll just also add that these changes are recent. So when Christine was a child, when Theresa was a child, aspects that they were both speaking about, from cattle to, raising your own food and everything else, was something that they grew up in. This is not something that happened 100 years ago, but something that we're talking about dramatic changes from the 1970s, the 1980s, the 1990s. So very, very recent, and unfortunately accelerating at a fast pace. Which kind of leads to the next question. So how has the landscape changed in your life? Theresa, what was it like when you would go down visiting family in Pointe-au-Chien and compare it to now?
Well, I was raised in Houma, but we used to go to my grandfather's house, which you had to go by boat.
Mm-hmm.
So, and sometimes we would walk. We'd get someone to cross us over to over from the canal, the cut-off canal. And so we would walk among cattle and trees. And sometimes we'd let my grandfather know that we were coming. So he would come by boat and get us. And I remember as a child riding in his boat and being able to pull marsh grass as we were going to his house. And then whenever Donald and I got married, I started shrimping with him. When we first got married, it was trapping. So which is something we can't do anymore because of the erosion. But we used to go shrimping, and I used to be able to, because the lakes and bays were well identified. And then I couldn't go with him in 1992, and then I think it was about like 4 or 5 years after I started going back with him every now and then.
Yeah.
And the landscape just changed so much that I told him, if you give me the wheel to drive us home, which I was able to before I could, because I had my land markings.
Yeah.
And so I told him, if you give me the wheel now, we would just go around in circles because it was all open water.
Right. So it become completely unrecognizable,
Right.
in just a short period of time. And that's a great window to look at from 92, when you've been going out with him for decades, and between trapping in the 70s and going out in the boat, So very familiar landscape to 4 or 5 years later, and then being a stranger in a strange land, so to
Right.
speak. I know when we bring students down, usually in the fall, that they think we're in the Gulf. And I'm showing them on the map where we are, which are unfortunately outdated because they're showing a lot of land existing that isn't there anymore. Patty, sorry, go on.
But on the GPS, like
Mhm.
whenever we're shrimping now on the GPS, yeah, a lot of places you are on land.
I know. It's a really strange situation that you look down on your GPS on the phone or whatever you're looking at to see that, and it shows you traveling on land and you're in open water. And the contrast is striking.
Can I add?
Yeah, please.
Living down in Pointe-au-Chien, I grew up on the Terrebonne side, so I grew up on my grandpa's property, but our neighbor, Mr. Noncan, but that's weird me saying that because we called him Nokshut, had cattle behind my house, and which goes towards the island, and we played baseball there. Now there's behind the house you might have, I'm not sure, Theresa, maybe 100.
And we're having modernity
Okay,
interfering.
So right behind where our tribal building is where we played, and Donald's grandpa had property there, who owned most of the property there, and now you cannot have a baseball game there. There were cattle there, that was gone, and also I was still trawling with my dad in 1980, 81, and still going down to Last Island, Timberlake Island, in the early 80s, mid 80s. And then from there to the 90s, I could see a difference. The landmarks were changing, landmarks were in the water. And then again, like maybe 2000, 2010, again, going down there and not seeing land there. Now you go there and there are dolphins right out in the cutoff. And recently my cousin telling me they're in the lakes, and alligators are there. So these two animals have come together where before you would never see them in the same waters.
Yeah, and the animals, going back to what Theresa was mentioning, when the land is disappearing, when the water is coming in, the animals that they used to trap, everything starts moving up, and the whole ecosystem is changed. And I think that part of the conversation is often missing when we talk about coastal erosion. People think of just like land going into water or being submerged underwater, while it's an entire system, and in this case, also an entire way of life, from the hunting, trapping, shrimping, growing crops, having cattle, being completely, independent, and being able to maintain so many tribal customs, and yet that's all affected by coastal erosion. I should mention, it's a common known fact here, but for our audience members, that Louisiana loses about one entire football field every 100 minutes. So for the length of this session, one regular standard NFL football field will go underwater, and it's going to stay underwater, to give you a sense of how fast this landscape is changing. And Terrebonne Basin is the fastest eroding. Christine mentioned living on the Terrebonne side. So also for our audience, just to let them know, Bayou Pointe-au-Chien, which goes right down the village of the tribe. On one side is Lafourche Parish. We use parishes, not counties, in Louisiana. And on the other side of that bayou is Terrebonne. So it's kind of like the width of a street, but you're technically in two different governmental assignments, which we'll talk about that complication later. Patty, did you want to talk about what some of these reasons are that we're losing a football field a minute? What's happening with that?
Yeah, so Theresa was talking about going to visit her grandpa and how people could walk. The land was hard, and that was the experience of everyone in our area. My mom was born in the late 1940s, and my grandparents had a palmetto house on the ground. Everything you needed, you could take from the earth. They had also mud and moss houses, and some people had wood plank houses, but they were lower. They were to the ground. They weren't. Most of them weren't elevated. But when oil and gas came in, they just cut the land up haphazardly, and doing that started bringing in salt water, which kills all the nutrients, the marsh grass, and then with the Mississippi River being levied, basically rerouted and redirected, there was no longer any freshwater flow, which replenishes the earth. So we have these two things fighting against each other, no more freshwater flow, and then all of the damage from the oil and gas exploration, because it wasn't just one cut here, one cut there, it's cut all over. And so basically people used to plant all the way down the bayou, and they had to stop doing that because there was no more fresh water. People didn't have fresh water to drink. People didn't have water for their animals. And lower Pointe-au-Chien on Pointe-au-Chien, they actually made, and around the 1850s, there was a freshwater basin that their cattle would have all that fresh water, or the horses, everything they had fresh water. And so that's a part of who we are, to be very self-sustaining. But these changes, which we weren't part of the decision-making process of how any of this worked, have impacted our ability to live, the way that we have, but people have adapted to that. But if you go down there now, where Theresa's talking about, where her grandpa lived, there's hardly any land, and all the trees are dead. So that's very that's very tragic, and there isn't any accountability to address that loss.
Right. So dramatic changes to the landscapes, not of your own doing, and pretty much not a lot of accountability for oil and gas for
No
creating all
accountability.
those.
Yeah, I would say no accountability.
No accountability.
Yeah.
Yes, let's not pretend here. There's none. And so you don't have the replenishment that would normally come from the Mississippi River, bringing nutrients down through the Atchafalaya Basin and into Terrebonne. And again, for the audience, this was an area of Louisiana that was growing because of those nutrients. So all the rivers from the Continental Divide pour into the Mississippi, and so they bring all that soil and all that nutrients and everything else with it, and you'd have this kind of annual natural flooding from the Mississippi that occurred down through the Atchafalaya, through Terrebonne. And so Louisiana was growing, and then it was growing, and then after 1927, because of a catastrophic flooding, the Army Corps of Engineers, federal government decided, well, if we build these high levees and straitjacket the Mississippi, then we won't have that flooding, without really thinking through the whole process of, but that also means that you're now not bringing that nutrient. So you have what we call land subsidence. The land is actually sinking at the same time that the water is rising. So it's multiple events that are affecting the homelands of Pointe-au-Chien. And I said in the beginning of this talk, I wanted to add climate change to this title, because climate change is something that is affecting the tribe dramatically. But it's not just the tribe. As we've seen in recent years, it's an everybody problem. It's a problem that is bringing more horrific storms, more horrific hurricanes, wildfires, all kinds of dramatic weather events. And for the tribe, they experienced probably the worst one in their living memory, and that was Hurricane Ida, which came ashore on August 29th. So we are just shy of 10 weeks from that event, and I want you to keep that in your mind. 10 weeks when you hear what the tribal members will have to say about the catastrophic destruction of Hurricane Ida. Came ashore on the anniversary of Katrina, so 16 years later. And It made first landfall in Pointe-au-Chien. It made second landfall in Pointe-au-Chien, and it went directly straight up the middle of the village of Pointe-au-Chien. Can you please let the audience know how Ida has affected the homes of the tribal members?
Well, it's disaster. It was the most devastating hurricane that's ever been in our community. My mother-in-law is 87 years old and she's never seen anything like this before. It's left only 12, now I'm speaking only on behalf of Lower Pointe-au-Chien. It left only 12 homes livable, and she almost completely wiped out our community. And we have a lot of people that are homeless. I mean, they're living with people, but as they've lost their homes, so that's why I say they're homeless, because really they are.
Yeah.
And we haven't had too many temporary housing trailers coming in, and they're still needing, to build tear down and build their homes. But it's people that's been there. I had a Presbyterian couple that came day before yesterday, and she says, I've never seen a war zone, but that's what it looks like to me, like a war zone.
I think that's a very apt description, because it's certainly not the first time that a hurricane has struck this community. But those had always been water events. Maybe you want to speak to the difference between and how you prepare for a water event versus this storm, which was very much a wind event.
Well, see, most of our homes are elevated, but whenever there is water, well, most people leave. And whenever, even the homes that do get water, whenever they have water, they come home, they clean up, they cut the walls, do what they have to do, and they can move back in. Whereas there's a wind, hurricane with so much devastation, it's so different. It's really unbelievable to see, Whenever we first got there, I mean, it was so heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking still.
Yeah, it's still, yes, it is very heartbreaking because, people, all your people are, just scattered.
Yeah.
And it's painful that they can't move, faster to get them closer to home to where they can do more on their properties.
Yeah. How do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think people don't realize that we were the front line before, but now, because all of the barrier islands are basically gone and our land, that we used to occupy, has basically been destroyed. There's no buffer.
Yeah.
So we're the buffer. We were the front line before, but now we're also the buffer, which means when the storm hit, there was nothing to slow it down. It was coming straight towards us, and also the Gulf is warmer, which makes the storms a little more ferocious and faster. And for us, if you see, after Katrina and Rita, people started, a little bit after Andrew, but mostly Katrina and Rita, people really started elevating their homes. But there weren't really resources for people to harden their homes, to elevate their homes, repair them from the flooding, and really harden them for a significant wind event. So we had adapted to the flood event, but this wind event we were not ready for. And I think that you can see that with all of the damage to the homes, that there hasn't been an investment in our community to make us, as or to help us be as resilient as we need to be. And again, I want to reiterate that this is not the cause of the people who live there, because, you know, you'll hear people say, oh, we shouldn't, you know, help people rebuild because the government keeps putting money and things like this into these communities. But FEMA really has been, it hasn't been equitable, because after Katrina Rita, there was funding, and I guess this wasn't FEMA, this was like a federal program, but in general, that money, you know, because a lot of people live on family property, it wasn't valued the same. People were treated as renters and not as homeowners, so they didn't receive as much money. And also our houses weren't valued as much, so the cost that people would get to fix their homes, even if they had insurance, wasn't the amount that they needed to fix. And FEMA doesn't deal with slow onset events. So over time, people are rebuilding their homes, adjusting to the events and the storms, but there wasn't funding for that. And again, that's the lack of accountability for the cause of these storms, which part of it is the decisions made to allow the exploitation of the land and the rerouting of the Mississippi.
So I want to start by saying that our community is devastated, but not to say that other communities have not had their own. I mean, I live in Berg and we've had devastation there too. But the further down south you go, the worse it gets, and it's obvious. Because when you get to Pointe-au-Chien or Dulac, which are the two areas I've been since the storm, you can see how worse the homes are, where people can't live. So I was little during Betsy, but there was never a time that we didn't go back to Pointe-au-Chien and say, this is the plan. Okay, so we've gotten water, we're going to clean up, we're going to get back together. This is the first time that I see people in our community go back and not have a plan. When you see the homes, very few, like Miss Theresa said, we had 12 families that could live. And since then, there's still very few who have come back. I can't think of maybe any. They can't come. So we're 10 weeks after the storm, and it's still the 12 people families who are still there. Nobody else has been able to go back because of the devastation. Either half of the home's gone, the whole home's gone, or the roof is gone. And this is the first time that our community has seen this type of devastation from the wind. We tried to protect ourselves from the floods because we've elevated. But as far as wind damage, this is the worst our community has ever been through.
And just to so the audience member knows some like context, Hurricane Betsy was in 1965. Hurricane Andrew was in 1992. Katrina and Rita were in 2005. Gustav and Ike in 2008. Isaac in 2012. Zeta, a whole slew of them last year. Yeah, we went straight into the Greek alphabet. And Zeta really affected this part of Louisiana, while like Hurricane Laura really affected, and Delta affected Lake Charles area. And then, of course, here we are in 2021. I also wanted to let the audience know, when they're talking about elevating homes, and especially after 2005, and then again in 2008, we're talking 15, 18 feet above the ground. So we're not talking 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet. So decisions were made and actions were taken, and on steel pilings, on concrete, on solid, built structures, because of a water event. So water in, water out, and the home would be protected. But of course, elevating your home that high up means you're that much more vulnerable to wind. And the wind here also just destroyed. So you can look online. You can go to the Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe website, their GoFundMe. And some homes, they're just steps. That's it. That's all that's left. It's just steps. others some walls. And when Christine was talking about losing a roof, the problem when you lose a roof is you lose everything inside. So from the street, you see the outside walls of a house and you think, well, that's not so bad. And then you go inside and of course, there's nothing. There's nothing at all there. And so this is different because it wasn't a matter of cleaning up after the water. This is a matter of there's nothing left. And the questions about rebuilding, but with what funds? And so going to what Patty was speaking about, FEMA being equitable or not in this case, and how tribes are different than individual homeowners, and the sharing of land in families. And so when you're labeled a renter, then what FEMA can and will do is much reduced. So it's not taking into tribal practices, long-held practices, and instead is kind of just treating them as single individuals. But that's also assuming that they're there, and they're not. So New Orleans makes big news, and then the media moves on. But the disaster is still down there, and 10 weeks later. And if we were able to film down there, if we actually had the internet, the cell phone, the power, the necessities to do that, we could turn the camera around and you could see this devastation, which looks like it happened a week or two ago. And this is with volunteers from Tulane that come every Saturday, volunteers that come from different church organizations, volunteers that have been coming from all around because of the desperate need to do it, but also their tribal members and volunteers are pretty much doing, I'd say, 90% of the work. 99.9% of the work.
Getting higher, yes.
Yeah, the roads, I mean, tell them who cleared the roads. So when you could first go down there, who actually cleared the roads filled with trees and bits and pieces and guts of houses all strewn everywhere, electrical poles. Who cleared the roads?
Donald, his brother, and other tribal members. Donald and his brother got on tractors, got their chainsaws, and went down the road and moved and cut trees.
Yeah.
And on Terrebonne's side, it was Jocko and Terry, and I don't remember who else, but all tribal members. Yeah, that cleaned both sides. Well, the community.
Yeah.
Not the parish.
No.
They
Members
still
of the
haven't,
tribe.
they still never came down to clean anything. They basically last week maybe started picking up debris, but there's debris all over that people have either with volunteers or family members or tribal members have moved that debris to the road. And it's just piled there higher than, it's like 8 feet high, 10 feet high. They haven't picked up that debris.
And how does that hamper the next step?
Well, some of them are told unless that stuff is moved, they can't get a FEMA trailer.
Mm-hmm.
That
Right.
has to be moved before they can get it.
So let's, Patty, can you let the audience member know about that one particular situation with FEMA and being denied one tribal member whose request for assistance was denied because they weren't home?
Oh yeah, we have a number of problems with FEMA because one, they tell people they're going to come to their houses and they don't show up. So I went by somebody's house yesterday and initially they thought I was FEMA because they've been waiting for FEMA since Monday. I mean, they were supposed to be at their house and yesterday was Thursday and they're like, oh no, it's Patty. But we have another tribal member who had been calling FEMA and then she got a letter in the mail saying that they had denied her claim for failure to respond. They said they went to her house and they left a note on her door. They knocked on her door and she didn't answer, so they left a note on her door, but she doesn't even have a door.
Yeah.
So now she has to appeal. And the one thing that Christine was mentioning earlier about schooling is that we've really had a lack of opportunity to attend school because schools weren't available until the late 1960s for our tribal members. And so we have elders who don't speak English, well, they don't may not communicate as well in English. And a lot of things that the state and the parish and the feds are requiring are for people to sign up online.
Online.
There's no internet down there. And, you know, do you have to have a username, a password, sign up online? Or even
the computer and all the rest of that. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have computers. People still
And
have
would know how to use it.
People still have flip phones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yesterday, I went by someone's house and I said, "What?" I was trying to write down their phone number to help them, and they're like, "Well, call your number with my phone. I don't know it." He had a flip phone. I said, "Okay." But they don't need that, right? They don't need that. But you know, none of the hotlines have people who speak Indian French who can talk to these tribal members, and we tried to help coordinate between the state and the parishes, especially with the housing. But they said, no, everybody has to sign up individually. And there's no representatives coming into our community to assist with the process. So everyone has to find a way to get out of the community and to the others, you know, like with the traffic, it could be 45 minutes to get to the civic center to try, and then you have to wait in line all day. So it can be, you know, it's just they're just not making it as a way to assist people.
No.
And a lot of people are getting denied. We had people coming in on this week who were getting denied for just various, you know, different reasons. And, you know, being on family property is, you know, problematic for dealing with FEMA, even though they say they've changed their rules. We have one tribal member who she had lived in a trailer before next to her parents' house. And when her parents passed away, she moved into that house. And FEMA said they weren't going to assist her with the house because she used to live in the trailer, but she hasn't lived in the trailer for years.
Right.
You know, so things like that, you know, you have to try to help people. And there isn't very much assistance. I would say hardly any assistance to help people. Especially if you need to write a letter, there's nowhere to print a letter.
Yeah.
No.
You know, there's
Even cell phone use is still so sporadic.
Yeah.
Another one had applied for FEMA and was denied because they didn't have flood insurance. Well, you're 15 feet, 18 feet up in the air. You really don't need flood insurance. If it floods there, then you know, all of the south of the coastal is going to be gone. So she had to appeal.
Yeah, well, another one was denied an SBA loan for not having flood
That's
insurance.
what it was, SBA,
Yeah.
because
But the thing that you were mentioning earlier when she was talking about, you know, people come back right away and they're working and trying to fix their houses usually after, you know, these flood events. And so this time there's a wind event, but people's houses were damaged by water because they're getting rain inside. And usually after a flood event, people come in, they're mucking out their houses, they're cleaning it, but there was no water.
right.
For a month, there was no water. So anything people would try to save by cleaning something couldn't happen because there was no water.
Yeah, we had electricity before we had water.
Yeah, we should clarify to the audience when we talk about water, we're talking about running water, the ability to flush a toilet, to wash your hands. I know, you know, for the first month, letting the ice to cool the food that you're going to then eat that day. You didn't have electricity, and then using that water then to be able to wash your hands and basic, you know, care of the body. Collecting rainwater is another way, and when need be, going down to the bayou and getting buckets of water. And during this whole month, nobody is there. There is no assistance. cell phone came in a few weeks, and even today, it's really spotty. And FEMA, if you stop and think about it for a moment, is saying, okay, in a moment of crisis, when you've lost all these resources, go online, fill out these forms, get your email, click that you signed up, and this is your username, go back, fill it out, this, that, and the other. It's nothing but a series of hurdles. And this also, if you're going to do this, you have to drive somewhere else. So again, gas was in very short supply 3-4 weeks after the storm. Even in New Orleans, gas was really hard. So you have to find the gas to go to a place, to stand in line, to do this. And you can see how these become compounded problems that can last a whole day, and then you get denied. And denied for bureaucratic reasons that don't make a lot of sense. Or the fact that you have to wait at your destroyed home, a home that has no door, has no roof, has nothing inside, because FEMA may show up one day, and if you're not there, then that also means that you're not eligible. So there's a lot of inequity and certainly a lack of understanding. And at this point, it's 16 years after Katrina. Like when Katrina happened and Rita shortly thereafterwards, 3 weeks later in September, FEMA was scrambling and trying to figure out what to do. But we have 16 years of disasters to, this should be a well-run, smooth machine, coming in, like the Red Cross coming in. This is what we do. We got a crisis. We set up tents. We do this. We do that. And it's not. Patty, what kind of other hurdles is the tribe facing right now?
Yeah, so when you're mentioning the access issues, really one of the issues is we're not federally recognized, so that impedes our response efforts, because even though we're mobilized and Donald, other people are clearing the roads, for example, in Lower Pointe-au-Chien, there are two sides of the bayou, we don't have authority to turn on the pumps. So the pumps weren't turned on, which means the water that accumulated in the community wasn't pumped out. And that's under the parish's control, right? Because we don't have control over that. So one of them didn't have fuel, one of them, the pump, doesn't work. There's a significant event coming and the parish doesn't put fuel in the pumps, but we have no control over that. And we made requests to the state and the feds for assistance. But the Fed said, well, you have to talk to the state. The state said you have to talk to the parish. We communicated with all of them, and there was really no response. And if we had federal recognition, they would have to deal with us directly. And I think our feeling is that none of these entities, 3 governmental entities, I guess 4 with the different parishes, they don't care about us. They don't care about us. They don't care if we have water. They don't care if we have electricity. They don't care if the roads are clean. They don't care if there's debris on the side of the road. They don't care if, it's not, they're not looking out to see if we have the same access to resources that others are being provided. Granted, in a time of crisis, there's a lot of need all over. So we recognize that. But to not even respond. Or when they do respond, I was sending emails on behalf of all the tribal all of our sister tribes and our tribe for requests, because when they could get in touch with me, they would text me or they would try to call me to tell me what's going on, to put in the request.
And you're in Arizona, just so
I was in Arizona because I had internet, so I'm sending these requests for what we need whenever I can get in touch with people and find out what's happening. People drive in, people drive out, try to give me a call. And somebody from the state told our commissioner on the Indian Affairs Commission, said, well, why is Patty sending these emails? Why aren't the tribal leaders contacting me directly? Like, it shouldn't be Patty, it should be the tribal leaders. I'm sorry, I'm the attorney for the tribe. If I make a request, I'm making it on behalf of the tribe, which I put in my email, and which I also said I was requesting on behalf of the other tribes also, which were reasonable things. We need water. People need food. We need the roads cleaned. All of these things, which still, debris hasn't been picked up still. The bayou is full of
homes.
Houses. Which makes it very difficult for our fishermen to go back to work. Because in the community, people provide for themselves, they share with each other. I mean, even right now when the Tulane students come down, people feel really bad because they're like, we want to cook for people, but it's very hard to do that when people's boats are getting hit by items when they're trying to go fishing.
And there's no homes to cook
To
in.
cook in.
Yeah, well, that's a
Right.
huge issue too. But but they're trying to make a
And I was
living
gonna add that.
and still share their resources, and it's dangerous.
Mhm.
I mean, it is dangerous.
So when this hurricane hit on August 29th, our August season had just begun.
Right.
I'm sorry. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
their livelihood.
Right.
That's their source of income. And so not only are they faced with a house that's gone, but they're faced without being able to make money for what they would 7 weeks, 8 weeks maybe. They just started going back
Right, just-
crabbing
yeah,
and shrimping.
yeah.
And not only that, usually they're going to share with everyone,
Mhm.
but there's like not a lot to share.
To share.
And and because they need to make money, and then usually they put up for the winter,
Mhm.
Right.
so they save that until the next season.
And freezers that you don't have
right,
anymore,
that
and
you
a
lost.
home that you don't have. And, we keep speaking about the debris. And so again, for the people listening today, Patty mentioned debris being, 5, 6, 7, 8, however feet high. These are debris, meaning the remains of the home. First, you have to clear all the remains of the home, all the content of the home, and it's put on the side of the road for being picked up. You can't do anything else until that debris is removed. And the tribe has already done so much clearing the roads and everything that's been discussed this morning, but they can't start removing these tons and tons and tons of debris, and including trees and everything else that was going down. And so it's been another, not just a really painful reminder when you see your entire life on a curb and wreck, but it's also preventing you from taking the next step. And so this isn't just like, yard debris or something like this. I just wanted to really kind of elaborate for the audience on that, and what that means. Reclaiming native ground, it was the title of this panel, and it's kind of taken on all kinds of different meanings with the storm. And something that I know several of you have heard and you've been asked, or people have made statements about, and it's a painful question, but I wanted to ask that, and that is, why not just move away, right? You've had storms, just move away. Why stay?
Because it's our home and it's where our roots are. And I mean, we have disasters everywhere.
Yeah,
You have disasters. They have places that they call Tornado Alley.
yeah,
And California has a lot of fires. They have droughts. I mean, is that, and earthquakes. So where would you put us?
Yeah.
I mean, and we're bayou people. We don't, I mean, I was raised in Houma, but I've been in Pointe-au-Chien, more than half my life, almost 40, almost 50 years. And so, I mean, I feel like I return to my roots because that's where my mom's from. My dad's from the island. And I mean, you're going to move everybody from all the other states. And, that's in Tornado Alley and all. You rebuild for them. We have some flooding sometimes in other states. They rebuild.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's home and that's where our roots are and that's where we want to be.
Right. Not less important.
I agree. It's a place that's unique to us. That's our home. We grew up there. I long to go back there. And during all this, I've not heard of one person, I haven't, they may have voiced it to other people that have told me that they're not going back. It could be they may have some not going back. I don't know. No one's told me they're not going back. Everyone I know, they'll say it might take a year or so, but they plan on going back. And we're to the point now where they need building supplies to begin.
And I think to your point, I mean, people are so desperate, I would say, to go back that they're bringing sheds in to live in
Yes.
sheds and, convert to it because it's, living in Pointe-au-Chien is different than living in a city or, an apartment or whatever, because you have all your kinship ties and you know that people are going to look out for you. Everyone in Lower Pointe-au-Chien is related somehow through their kinship ties. Right? And everything you need, people don't make a lot of money, but they are able to provide for themselves and their families, and they share, right? They share what they're able. I mean, even after the storm, who was planting? Was it Eugene?
Eugene was planting.
Yeah, he's planting. He has some cucumber. Like, he started planting after the storm to see what he can grow to have available because everybody lost their gardens, so he's going to hopefully have some potatoes for winter. Because I told him, we're going to have boiled shrimp on Saturday. He's like, I said, we need potatoes and corn. He's like, oh, my potatoes aren't ready yet. Or I could give you some potatoes. But that's just how people are. It's and I think that we need to think about this, as collective, like how are we going to provide for each other? So in our community, we are thinking about the future. Everybody thinks about the future. That's why you don't take everything. You leave things for the future, and you think about the future. And I think we're thinking about, and what the tribe has been thinking about, how do we protect our sacred sites, our cemeteries below the cutoff, rebuild areas. We've been working on these projects, and if we were federally recognized, we would have more resources for these projects. There are grants that we can't apply for because we're not federally recognized. We've been trying to defend our land that's been,
Raped.
basically exploited because some companies are asserting that they have title to it, and the court, Eastern District of Louisiana in the 90s said that they weren't going to decide that until the federal government decided whether to recognize us or not. So we have hope, and people have hope, even though you can see the loss. We know that there are things that could be done. People just don't want to invest in the things that we know that can be done, but we're not going to stop advocating for that.
So it's more than just homes, though. It's the land and what the land means to the tribe.
Yeah, like
Absolutely.
saving our mounds and our
Yes.
cemetery. And we, in 2019, we did a living shoreline,
What's
to
that?
protect. That's oyster shells in 30-pound sacks, and they're dropped down into the water until there's enough to protect the land. And it's been checked since Ida, and the shells help protect the washing away of more land. So, and there's baby oysters growing.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Everywhere.
So, and we're talking to CRCL about more living shoreline.
Yeah.
So Teresa's saying about the living shoreline, so that's along one of our mounds. But it's from a waterway that was initially dug by an oil company to get the equipment where it needed to be.
No. That one wasn't. That was like a Theresa, like across the Pointe-au-Chien Canal.
Right.
That Theresa, that if we don't do something now, that it's going to get all eaten up again, because it's already a big old, well, bigger than a horseshoe now. That was a
natural
No, it's a boundary.
It's a boundary that they cut.
Right.
It
It's
was
from
a
me.
Yeah.
It wasn't for their equipment. No.
It was just they
It
cut
was
it for
It
them
was
to do
just
what.
3 feet, about 3 feet.
Right. I knew it was small,
So
and now it's about.
They can't put equipment through there. No, it wasn't for equipment. It was a boundary, like, okay, like I'm marking off
They just dug a
40
boundary.
acres here, that's mine.
Oh, it's a split.
Yeah.
And that's why they
Yeah.
started right there where those mounds are, that was also, they were trying to cut a boundary through the cemetery.
And they were stopped.
Yeah.
Right.
That's when they went out there with the guns and said, no, you can't come through this. And then the company tried to get our tribal members arrested for trespass, and that's when we filed the lawsuit.
And it was our property.
Yeah. So,
But now this waterway is started 3 feet, and
Yeah.
now it's probably
Over 50 feet.
Yeah,
over 50 feet.
and so
Yeah.
the current passes very swift there, and that's what's eroding the land.
And we're working on getting some backfill, some
Right.
canals
Yes.
backfill.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, just as by way of background for the audience, so you have cutting through the land to run the pipelines or to bring equipment. But what they're talking about here with boundary lines is literally, it's like making an inverted fence. Like, okay, we're going to mark off this boundary by cutting straight through the land, like 3 feet. So in addition to all those other cuts, and they come at all kinds of different angles, you just have that happening too. And what Patty spoke to is one of those boundary lines wanted to go right through sacred area and burial ground, and tribal members had to go out with guns and stand guard on it.
So what this area where they're talking about this Trenas, it was part of a mound complex.
Right.
So when they cut that boundary line, they separated this mound from the rest of the mound complex.
Right.
And there's no, they didn't contact us or anything like that. And, when they're cutting these areas, it's for total disregard of what the land means to us, our families, our ancestors. And yeah, so there's a number of mound complexes. And so that was done in other areas too, but with total disregard. And so the consequences are severe. So now that's a deep area
Yeah.
where it was land.
Yeah.
Right. And so where's the accountability for that?
There's none.
There's none.
There's none.
No, there's none.
No, there's none.
None. And
Because
How
basically,
does that make you feel?
Not good.
Yeah.
So basically, they found our community and felt like they could do whatever they wanted. Didn't communicate with the people. We all spoke just French, but this happened in 1930s.
Well, the early, when they
20s,
started coming
30s,
in was in
yes.
the 30s when the oil and gas was found.
Right, but they've been doing this
Yeah,
Ever
but they
since.
keep doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is unfortunately something that has continued.
Right.
Yeah, they're trying to claim the land under the Swamplands Act, but under the Swamplands Act, you're supposed to drain the land, drain the water, and make it usable. You're not supposed to cut the land
Right.
to bring more water in.
Yeah. And also the Swampland Act also assumes that there are no people living on it.
Right.
And there were people
Mhm.
living right there where they're cutting through. They had people living all through
Oh,
that
yes.
area.
Yeah, along the bayou.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's unfortunately a common theme when we speak of First Nations, of Indigenous people of North America, and that is exploitation. And recently on sort of national, international news was everything with DAPL, the Dakota Access Pipeline. And here is something that's happening in Pointe-au-Chien, not just one pipeline, not just two pipelines, not just three. I don't even know how many oil and gas. I don't even know if anybody actually knows how much is there.
They're marked on a map, but I don't know. Maybe there's a number. I don't
There's a
know.
lot that aren't used anymore that
Yeah.
are capped off also.
But they're not marked.
And like, and also
For at night, it's very dangerous.
Mhm. Yes.
You
yeah,
don't know the area.
you don't know the area, and it's
Mhm.
also some are leaking, and old abandoned wells and
Mhm.
things like that. So we spoke about that living shoreline, which is the work of the organization by CRCL, and they collect oyster shells from the restaurants in New Orleans and then put them in these sacks and then bring them down. And oysters kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, but they almost like adhere to the soil, but they make like a natural reef in a way, and also they continue to grow. So it's a fantastic way of taking a resource from New Orleans that would just go into a landfill and bringing it down. What are other ways of trying to reclaim native ground from like federal recognition to, you mentioned briefly their Aboriginal land claim. What are things that the tribe are trying to do to promote, but also to protect the tribe itself?
So the backfilling,
Mm-hmm.
Theresa. So there's a study, there were some studies done how backfilling these oil canals is actually could be cheaper than some of these other restoration projects. I think it's FPCC received a grant, the First Peoples Conservation Council. Is that who received the grant for backfilling? Or was it Lowlander?
I think it was Lowlander.
And Teresa's on these boards, and several tribal communities have grants, and they're small projects, but I think if we can do one, then we can say, look, this is sustainable. And we should be doing them in more places. And there's been studies about it. So, we want the investment for that.
They actually did one in Lafitte, I think.
Okay.
And it did well. It shows,
Yeah.
building land.
And then the other thing that we've been doing is we've been working with our traditional knowledge holders. They know where everything is and how things respond to different changes in the land. But Western science hasn't really accepted the knowledge of our tribal people who only lived and occupied this area since time immemorial. So, go figure. But, we have been working with Sea Grant to merge that traditional knowledge with Western science so that we can show that what our tribal members are saying and our knowledge holders are saying actually, matches some of this Western science, and to identify places that can, where we can do restoration projects. So where they're hardened and where we could do projects so that we could advocate for that. So one of the problems is, in order to have projects, you have to be in the Louisiana Master Plan. And if you're not in the plan, you can't get federal or state money for those projects. But even if you're in the plan, it doesn't mean they're going to do the project.
Right.
You have to raise the money to do the project. So those are like complicated factors. But initially, when they first did the plan, they didn't take into account any tribal people in that plan. So, but I think that goes along with the theme of, what they care about. And I mean, that's an ongoing, it's systemic, right?
Right.
It's a systemic issue. I think we believe that they would be okay with our area not being protected because then it would just be for sports fishermen.
Right.
Yeah.
They would like to see us go.
And we feel like we're
And
so
that's why
close
we
to
have-
the island that, we could be the next target. The island is our neighbor. And we've seen throughout the years what's going on with the people there. They're not even within the levee system. But then yet on the island road, the state has built this nice boat
fishing piers.
launch, fishing piers, and then you get to a part where Mr. Edison and Miss Elizabeth live in the big curve, and it's like third world country,
Yeah.
and we're next door, and so we feel like we're gonna fight for our property. We're not leaving.
Right.
We're not gonna let it go like that. Because if you go down where we live every day, it did stop during a storm, but every day you see so many fishermen going down there, and which is fine,
Commercial fishing.
commercial.
Well, not
no,
commercial,
no,
sports
fishermen, yeah, recreational
Yeah,
fishermen.
recreational.
Which is fine, but
Weekend warriors.
that's not what our community is. A community. People live there. That's our property there, and so
But it's also
it's not going to
fisherman's
happen.
paradise.
It sure is.
And that's why they built, and that's what they said. They told that to Sherry. Someone from the Wildlife and Fisheries said that, because she says, why did y'all build piers? And y'all building kayak launches, to launch their the kayaks and back at the Wildlife and Fisheries and across from Wildlife and Fisheries. They said because this is where the fish bites all year round. It's the real fisherman's paradise. It says anywhere you go, if it's not one spot, you can go to another spot and they'll have fish.
Even
Yeah, but
crabbing,
but-
it's just unbelievable how many people go just crabbing off the roadside, and sometimes it is hazardous because I passed there where people are so close to the road. Someplace there's no shoulder. So, people just park themselves there. There could be young kids there, but we live down there. So we pass there every day. And it's kind of dangerous some places where people just decide to park on the side of the road.
And some of these sports fishermen take out of our fishermen's crab traps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so
Basically
when
stealing.
they do that, they're taking from the livelihood of our, like, no respect for their crab traps.
So there's a lot to unpack here that I want to, again, just kind of give a little more background information on. We're talking about sports fishermen right now, today, last weekend, the weekend before, and undoubtedly this weekend, who are driving through the wreck of Pointe-au-Chien, these homes, people working, volunteering, and they're just bringing their boats to have their little fun on the weekend and driving right back through. So not giving back to the community, not even stopping, not even offering. It's like, nope, we're here having fun, coming from wherever they're coming from, New Orleans, other places, Baton Rouge. And the state also quite clearly sending the message, tourism is important. Tourism matters, whether it's local tourism or people coming from Texas or Mississippi or wherever. But tourism, will place our dollars there, but not into the tribes. And then
there's no economic benefit from those fishermen in our community.
No economic benefit. So they're not buying from the tribe. They're not giving back to the tribe. They're not contributing in any way. They're simply exploiting and at times stealing from the tribe directly and knowingly. There's no accidental, whoops, how did this crab get into my pot, from that nice crab trap. The island was mentioned several times, and that is another tribe that is in southern Louisiana and the closest one to Pointe-au-Chien, and it's Ile de Jean Charles with Chief Albert Natcan. They were in the news about 5-6 years ago because they were awarded sizable amount of money from HUD, which the state of Louisiana then had control over in determining its fate. But it was to relocate. It was to leave their ancestral land and to relocate. Pointe-au-Chien has taken a different position. You want to tell why you're the resiliency, the staying, not following what Ile de Jean Charles is doing?
So, I mean, Theresa could probably answer best, but I can start and she can add. But, Ile Jean Charles made a decision when they were excluded from the Morganza to the Gulf in the early 2000s that they had lost a lot of land. They saw it coming. They weren't going to be protected. And I think with Katrina, Rita, or Gustav Ike, there was this ring levee put about around their community. And so the water came in, but it didn't leave. I guess because they didn't turn the pumps on either, because that's the parish. But they made a decision, hesitantly, that, hey, we want a place to resettle. So many people have left already. We are excluded from this levee. Once you're excluded from the levee, if there's a levee around you, everything in your area is going to get pummeled. So they are, and I think it was way cheaper it would have been cheaper to include them in the levee than to resettle them. But they made a decision that it wasn't worth including the island in the Morganza to the Gulf levee. So they made that decision to resettle when they knew that they, would have this consistent flooding. We're the last leg on the Morganza, and they're still not done. I don't think that it's an accident that the last leg of the Morganza is an indigenous community, because that just exposes us more. 2 years ago for Barry, which was just not hardly a storm, we were flooded for that because everyone around us has levees, so it pushes the water into your community because now you have a funnel. But people did make that decision. Like, we have focused on adaptation. We think it would be great to have a place of land for people to evacuate to, because people, think with the increased storm events, even if you have a hardened home, you don't want to stay in there for, 150-mile wind. That would not be smart.
No.
You want it to have some place to go. So we have thought about that and talked about it in the past, like having a place to go, to be safe in the event of a storm. But people in Pointe-au-Chien made the decision to adapt. But I think that the decision to resettle for the island was forced on them. They didn't really have, but they wanted to resettle together. That's why they made that decision, so they could resettle together as a community to maintain their cultural heritage. And they had a plan, and the plan was hijacked.
Right.
And the houses should be all built.
Yeah, 2015. It's been 6 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we decided, well, we didn't even talk about resettlement because this is home.
Yeah.
And we can't see, I mean, you move us further in, like there, right now it would take about 45 minutes for someone to leave to go fishing, in Pointe-au-Chien. Donald has his boat not right now, but it's still in.
Before Ida,
Before Ida, he had his boat right across the street from the house, and when he wanted to go shrimping, he just had to cross the street, and get in his boat and take off. I mean, it's like moving a tree away from the water and putting it in the desert,
You'd be a fish out of water if we moved somewhere else.
Yeah, well, I use a tree because, but I mean,
You're as solid as a tree, yes.
well, no, but.
Well, with that said, with Theresa saying about Donald
Yeah.
leaving, crossing the road, getting his boat and going shrimping. So with the hurricane, a lot of our people are out of our area now that they've begun shrimping and crabbing again, and they're living somewhere else, either by Blue, Berg, Homa, whatever. That's quite a distance for them to get to their boat to go out shrimping or crabbing. So that's one reason we are really in need of getting trailers out there so people can get back at least on their property and go on to do whatever they do, fish, shrimp, whatever. We need them. And then with that, we've all spoken about rebuilding with materials that are sustainable to the winds that we just experienced with this hurricane.
Yeah, so that leads to my last question for the session today, and that is, how can people assist? So we have a pretty large audience, and would love to know what you can tell them about how they can assist. I know we have, again, it's hard for us because we're kind of all sitting back to type things in here, but you can certainly reach the tribe through the website, which is pactribe.com. So tribe.com. There's a donate button with PayPal, which is 100% tax deductible. And the tribe also has a GoFundMe page. But again, you can reach all that through the tribe's website. What are other ways that audience members or shout outs that you want to give? Because we do have nearly 200 people listening right now, and this is going to be released and available to the general public.
So what we really need are homes.
Right, home. Systems with home.
Yeah, but not just homes. As Christine was saying, we need people to have temporary places to live, and that is really slow moving, and it's starting to get cold. So we need temporary places where they're going to live temporarily, so that they have time to rebuild resiliently.
Smart.
And smart, adapting to these changes. So with that said, we need plans that are resilient. that
Yeah.
can withstand the winds. And we had some houses built after Katrina and Rita, and the structures were sustained the winds.
Right.
Right. So we know that that can be done. We have several buildings that withstood the winds. Like, you know, if somebody has special skills and can look at that and say, you know, this one withstood it for X, Y, Z. Okay, let's create some plans. We know what can be resilient. And then we need to fundraise to try to raise money for those building materials and not building materials that won't withstand the storm, because that's no good to have a plan and then you don't have the right materials to withstand the storms, and then, you know, help actually building those homes. And the reason why I say that is, you know, with FEMA, the most that you can get is $36,000. And with our most of the people down the bayou, they don't have insurance because the wind insurance for our tribal building is like $12,000 for a 1,200 square foot building. So people can't afford that.
Yeah.
So, you know, like this would be a call to invest in our community. And if we could build resiliently, create some prototypes and build resiliently, we think that could be a model for the coast. Like, so we see this is an opportunity for
Exactly. But in all
Can we use their
seriousness,
skills?
though, it is
Yeah.
an opportunity, and it's not a portion problem.
That's right.
That's right.
The whole
Everybody.
coast.
Yes.
The whole
Whole
coast
coast.
here, the whole coast of Florida, Staten Island, Long Island, you know, all of these issues. That might be mine. Excuse me.
I put mine on silent.
I thought I put mine on silent too.
It's been humming.
Our phones don't ring down the bayou. So
We don't have to, it's already silenced. We don't need to silence it.
It's a new sound to us.
Well, we managed to make it nearly the whole time without a cell phone interruption, and I thought I had turned mine off, and with all the technical difficulty, obviously had not. No, as I was saying, is that that was a very real human interruption. That this is a problem, and so we look at, you know, we have these discussions on camera, off camera about what are sustainable ideas, what are like processing gray and black waterways, solar, what are ways that the tribe can be independent, but there's knowledge out there. There's knowledge that you and the audience have and people that you know have. And sometimes contributing that knowledge is very valuable. Dollars work, you know, dollars are always very good, but there's an opportunity here to collaborate with the tribe in a way to become a model for other communities. Because as Theresa has so eloquently said, the idea of moving away is not only insulting, but it's not sustainable. Like, why are wildfires or earthquakes or Tornado Alley, you know, more important? Why are those communities than this one? And pretty much, there's few places in the world that I can think of. I can't actually think of any where you're not facing some sort of crisis. And climate change is here, and it's not going to get better. So the idea is not to run, but it is to face it, to adapt.
You have to.
Yeah,
Yes.
you have to. So this is so much more than the tribe, but the tribe, to me, it is an opportunity to how we think about these issues. Patty, can you read any of those, because it's a little bit far away
Yeah,
from me?
this is from Rachel P. And she does animal research. She is wondering if we could speak to anything about the history of animals in our culture and the relationship with animals.
Well, we used to trap animals and make a living.
Tell them what kind of animals.
We used to trap nutria, coons, muskrats, and catch otters and minks. And then we used to also sometimes catch, I don't know what you call them. We call them prairie hens, but they're a little bird, and I haven't eaten some since Donald stopped trapping. But we used to get food, that way too, from trapping also. But yeah, we used to trap those animals and skin them and fix the pelts and dry them and sell them.
And then the other relationship we have with animals is not only we fish, crab, oyster for living, but that's what we eat also.
Yeah.
Duck hunt, and then with the so we talked about the climate change
during the season.
we take during the season, right,
Right.
when it's time. But and we're going to talk about the season. That's what I wanted to bring up is that so every May or end of April, when you start thinking about the state begins thinking about the beginning of our shrimping season, our May season. So our men, Mr. Donald, other men from the community go to these meetings, but it seems like whatever they suggest or whatever, nothing, their suggestions never come into play. But because of the changing of the climate, they're wanting to change. The men who shrimp know when the shrimp is ready. And so they know, they go to these meetings and say, look, we should open a little bit earlier or whatever. And those suggestions are not taken. So our shrimp is even different. The times that we begin shrimping, they're a different size. And then with the duck hunting. So because it's warmer during the winter now, or the ducks are not coming all the way down to Pointe-au-Chien. And that was part of our, we duck every season. That's part of our what do you call that?
Last year they had a lot of poodoo. I don't know
Yeah,
what you call
I don't
that.
like poodoo.
Well,
But
it's
not many
it's
duck, the
Martian.
Martian,
No,
yeah.
it's not a marsh hen.
the
No,
black
marsh hen is
poodle?
different. Poodle is
Poodle is
different.
water
I
hen.
don't-
Well, I don't know. They're
a coot,
coot,
maybe a
coot,
coot,
coot.
a coot, maybe.
They're good
Yeah,
though for
yeah.
Thanksgiving. They're just
But,
little.
But that's part of our diet that we don't get much of anymore. You
Yeah.
know,
But that's what people would eat that at Thanksgiving a lot, huh? The poodoo.
And duck.
duck.
And
no,
duck.
and
What
Christmas and stuff.
was popular was a poodoo and oyster gumbo. Yeah. But yeah, and we had cattle before, and
yes.
we had pigs, and when
Mhm.
people would kill a cow, they'd
Mhm.
share,
They
the
did, yeah.
meat, the pig, because they had no refrigeration
Right.
back there. And
Right.
then even still, since me and Donald were married, Donald's grandfather had some cows on Bat La Pointe, and we used to go and every week we would go make sure that they had water, because they had a well,
Yeah.
and we would take water out of the well to give the cattle water.
Yeah.
And but when they would kill one well, they would share the meat.
Mhm.
Right.
And we had chickens. We had all kinds
Chicken
of
and my
animals.
grandma, yes,
Sustainable.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very little did they have to buy. I mean, they had their cows for the milk, and when it was time, they'd have a cow slaughtered and they'd share. They'd go halves, and then she'd buy another cow. She always raised cows,
Yeah.
and that's what she ate. And pigs, the same thing.
Right. So I think we have some more
So
questions. here.
there's a question is have you had any contact with national organizations who are addressing climate change and sustainability issues to present yourselves as a potential model / case study? So I don't think that we presented to any national orgs as a case study. We did file a complaint with the United Nations and 9 special rapporteurs dealing with the issues caused by the erosion and land loss, basically human rights violations by the federal and state governments. And we are now in the process of asking the administration to request a visit by the special rapporteur so that they can investigate the complaint.
Right. So I would say, again, if there are national organizations that you think would be interested in hearing from the tribe, please send the tribe a message. Yeah. And because you may know something that we don't, or have, again, a connection with that. There's also question about federal recognition. Can you see that?
Yeah, it says, how close are you to gaining federal recognition as a tribe? Is there anything that outsiders can do to help that process? And then a follow-up question is, are there more reasons to hope for federal recognition with Deb Haaland at the helm of the Department of the Interior? So what I would say about federal recognition is that, it's a very long process.
Yeah.
You need anthropologists, historians, genealogists. We are in the process of, our goal before IDA, and I think we still have to make it our goal, was to try to submit by March. Because we want to be evaluated under this administration. There haven't been any tribes evaluated, I think, under the new regulations, which were adopted in 2015. So our goal is to try to get our petition submitted so it can be evaluated under this administration, because we know that it will take a while. Even though it says 6 months, it will take longer than that for it to be reviewed. And we think that's very vital to our self-determination. I think, this administration, we haven't seen any petitions evaluated yet, but we haven't seen any evaluated under the new regs, but I think we're more hopeful that we get a fair evaluation.
Yeah, and again, federal recognition really means you have a seat at the table. So
Yes.
throughout the last hour or so, there have been different mentions to this. The tribe is state recognized, but not federally recognized, which means that, again, when a crisis happens, the federal government comes in, or even the state governments, and they never, ever come to the tribe and say, what's happened? What can we do? Your direct hit from IDA. Federally recognized, it would be that nation to nation, government to government, and you would have this conversation. And instead, there's a lot of sort of knocking at the door to try to get a seat at the table. And as you've heard today, the tribes are advocates for themselves. They're not sitting around waiting, for things to happen. They've been taking matters into their own hand for a very long time. But there's only so much you can do, and especially with issues that are not of your making and issues that are beyond your control, such as climate change and coastal erosion.
So I think the second part of the question is elevating our issues is important. When we submit our petition, people can comment on the petition. But, if you have special research skills and want to help out, please reach out to us. Again, you can go to the website, pactribe.com, and there's a contact button. You can reach out to us.
Yeah. So I think we are officially out of time. We're 1 minute over. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I wish it had been in person, and we'd be able to talk with you afterwards. But again, if you would like to reach the tribe, it's pactribe.com. Thank you again, Theresa, Patty, and Christine from the Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe for making the drive to Tulane, and thank you to Tulane for hosting us in this room. And we wish everybody a wonderful, wonderful weekend and wonderful rest of the conference. Thank you. Bye.